Welcome back. All right, so this is one of those things where I started getting ready to do a video on one topic, and then I went, no, I want to talk about this instead. So I want to talk about the standings, where everybody's at, and some of the bigger surprises. Surprises both in the positive and in the negative. And this is where we start to get into that conversation because we're getting closer to American Thanksgiving. So we get to that conversation of, so how many teams that are currently in a playoff spot will still be in a playoff spot in April, in May? When we get into the playoffs at the start of May, who will still be in that conversation? So Winnipeg's first in the Central. They have a record of 15 games, 9-3-3. Their points percentage is 700. And I thought the points percentage was important to have on here because there's a lot of teams that are outside the playoffs that have a decent record. And there's going to be teams this year with decent records who miss the playoffs. The playoff cutoff could be as high as 95, 96 points. It could be a lot. So for Winnipeg, they've got off to a very good start. And as I said, their points percentage is 700. Over their last 10 games, 7-1-2. They've won 3 in a row. The win over Edmonton last night might have been their most impressive of the season, if not for the 2 power play goals that Edmonton got, because they always get power play goals. That game could have been even more impressive. But again, that's understandable because it's Edmonton, it's their power play, and that's kind of how it works. Now, second place in that division is Minnesota. They have a record of 10-5 in 15 games, 667 points percentage, but they're 6-4 in their last 10. They did lose their last game last night. So for Minnesota, it has slowed down from where it was to start the season, sure, but that's where those fast starts come in really handy, even over an 82-game schedule. That fast start can be the difference between making the playoffs or not making the playoffs. You've built a cushion against those teams that are behind you, and it can be really tough to catch up during the season. The 3-point game makes it more difficult. So the Nashville Predators are third. 9-6-1 is their record in 16 games, so they've played one more game than Minnesota and Winnipeg. 594 points percentage. They're 7-2-1 in their last 10 games. They did lose last night against Toronto. But honestly, these 3 teams, surprised they're in that order. I like that order. I think that'd be great if that's what we end up with for the playoffs. But again, it's still early. And then we get to the Pacific where things are completely different than expected, right? Anaheim, 17 games, 10-4-3 record, 676 points percentage. It's worth noting that Anaheim has the lowest points percentage of any of the division leaders, but it doesn't really matter, right? So they're 8-0-2 in their last 10. They have won 8 in a row, and winning 8 in a row is not what anybody expected from Anaheim this year. Their next game is against Carolina. That will be a big challenge, although last night Washington was a big challenge too, and they did well with that. And then right behind them, with 15 games played and 11-4 record, so they have 2 games in hand, Edmonton. And Edmonton has a better points percentage as well at 733. They're 6-4 in their last 10. They did lose their last game, which was last night against Winnipeg. So for Edmonton, that 6-4 record would tell you, same as with Minnesota, that fast start absolutely helps. And so for Edmonton, that 11-4 record is impressive, and we'll see whether or not they're able to rattle off wins that quickly over their next 15 games as well. Because a record of 22-8, hey, you're going to be a playoff team. The Calgary Flames, 16 games, 8-3-5 record, and this is where things are interesting. If you look at wins, they've won 50% of their games, which would be a 500 record, right? 1 win, 1 loss, that's 500. But because of the 5 overtime loss points, they have a 656 points percentage. Not only that, but over their last 10, they're 4-2-4, and their last game was an overtime loss against Philadelphia. So those overtime loss points are costing them, but because they're not losing often enough in regulation, they are staying in the top 3 in that division. We'll see how long that's the case. Then you have the wildcard teams. You have St. Louis, 15 games, 8-5-2 record, 600 points percentage. So their points percentage is better than Nashville's, but they're 3-5-2 over their last 10. They've lost 3 in a row. I wasn't concerned with the first 2 losses because those were Carolina and Edmonton. Really good teams, but last night's against Arizona, that's a red flag. So for St. Louis, there's got to be some concern, I would think. You want the overall numbers to be better for the team than what they've been over the last 10, but they're still in a playoff spot for now. LA, also 8-5-2, 600 points percentage. But they've got points in their last 8 games, and 7 of those are wins. They're 7-2-1 in their last 10. Their last game was an overtime loss. No shame in that. We'll see whether or not they can keep that points record going. So we have a division now where 4 teams from the Pacific are in the playoffs. Unexpected. And then you get into the teams just below the playoff line. Vegas, 16 games, 9-7 record, 562 points percentage. So their points percentage is lower than the others. And this is where it's interesting. They've won one more game than Calgary. However, they haven't lost anything in overtime or a shootout. Therefore, since their losses are all in regulation, they have a worse record than Calgary. However, they're 7-3 in their last 10. They did lose last night, of course, against Carolina. No shame in that. But they're making up ground on the Calgary Flames. San Jose Sharks, 15 games, 8-6-1 record, 567 points percentage. So there's points percentage, thanks to overtime losses. Just that little bit higher than Vegas. They're 4-5-1 in their last 10. They did win last night against Minnesota. And they're not out of this. So we now have a division here where you have 4, 5, 6 teams that are all in the hunt for a playoff spot out of 8. You have Dallas right beneath them, 6-6-2 in 14 games, a 500 record. They're 4-4-2 in their last 10. That's also a 500 record, but they have won 2 in a row. So for Dallas, they have a game in hand on both St. Louis and LA, but they're going to have to start stringing some wins together in order to catch up. Colorado, 6-5-1 overall. They have a 542 winning or points percentage. I always want to say winning percentage, but that's not the case because I grew up without the 3-point game, so I grew up remembering as winning percentage. It's points percentage because there are losses that affect it. But yeah, they're 5-4-1 in their last 10. They have won 2 in a row, and they're in Vancouver tonight. I do expect them to beat Vancouver. The game is very important to them. They understand they need to go on a bit of a winning streak here to catch up to the teams ahead of them and to start getting to the point where they were supposed to be this year. It's been a very slow start. Then you get to Vancouver. So there's this steep drop-off between Colorado and Vancouver. Vancouver, 16 games, 5-9-2. So they have no games in hand on teams that they're chasing other than Anaheim, who they're pretty far behind. Vancouver has 12 points. Anaheim has 23. So that one game in hand probably doesn't help you catch them. 375 points percentage. So you go from 542 here to 375. They're 2-7-1 in their last 10, and they've lost their last 3 in a row in regulation. So it is a precipitous drop for the Vancouver Canucks, and this is why there's heat on the general manager and the coach. I don't know that it goes anywhere, but there's heat on them. Chicago has recovered from a rough start. Can they get back into the playoff picture? They're 4-9-2 overall. It's a 333 points percentage, so that's not great. It's better than it was. They're 4-5-1 in their last 10. They have won 3 in a row. So tonight they're in Seattle. If they can beat Seattle, they get themselves into a better position. And if they were to win that game and Vancouver loses in regulation, they'll jump past Vancouver because they'll have a better points percentage than Vancouver does. Seattle, 4-10-1, 300 points percentage. They're 3-7 in their last 10. They've lost 4 in a row. It has just been right off the cliff for Seattle. And I don't know. They looked half decent early, but we keep waiting for things to turn around, and they're just not. So Seattle is in a far worse position than expected, but they're still better than Arizona, although not by as much as one might think. Arizona's 2-13-1, 156 points percentage. They're 2-8 in their last 10, but they won last night. And if Arizona is now going to start getting results because of their work ethic, they're going to surprise some people with the wins that they get now. So we'll see. They have 2 wins. That puts them on pace for 10 wins this season, which is anemic, but that would beat the Washington record of 8. So Washington would be safe. All they have to do is reach 9 to beat the Washington record. And then they've tied Winnipeg with their record from, I want to say 81-82. A really miserable season for Winnipeg towards the start of the 80s. So that's your picture in the West. There are 4 teams that right now look like they're out, which is Vancouver, Chicago, Seattle, and Arizona. Other than that, anybody above that line, it's possible. Dallas, we'll see, but anybody else above there, it's possible they make the playoffs. Let's go to the East. See if it's just as competitive there. Well, you got Florida at the top of the Atlantic, 16 games, 11-2-3 record, 781 points percentage. So a better points percentage here than any team in the West, although you have the Jets right there and you have the Oilers right there as well. 5-2-3 in their last 10. They did win last night. They needed that win last night. It has been a rough couple of weeks for Florida, right? It's like they put everything they had into that game against Carolina or something. So, yeah, for Florida, it's been a bit of a rough go, but they're still first in that division. But Toronto's making it interesting, aren't they? They're 11-5-1 now, 676 points percentage, and they're 9-1 in their last 10. They've won 4 in a row. Toronto is a very good team right now, and they're playing like it. Not only that, the scary thing is, so for a couple of those wins, you could look and go, well, they're just getting their scoring from their top 4 highest paid guys. It's started to evolve. They're starting to get scoring from elsewhere in the lineup. Tampa Bay, 14 games, 8-3-3 record, 679 points percentage. They're 6-1-3 in their last 10. They've won 2 in a row. So they're benefiting from the fact they've only lost 1 in regulation. They've only won 6 out of 10 so far, but 3 of those losses in extra time. So by virtue of only having 1 loss in regulation, they're staying right there. Their points percentage is still higher than Toronto's. And again, when you look over into the West, they would be very high up in the West as well. Because that's always the argument is the East stronger than the West? I think so, but I think it's closer than some people will give them credit for. So then we go to the Metro, where Carolina leads, 14 games, 12-2 record, 857 points percentage. And that's why I'm wearing Carolina gear, because it's been a remarkable start to the season. They're 8-2 in their last 10. They've won 2 in a row. We may be at a point where, I'll say by March, if they keep playing it this way, and I mean, they're not going to keep up the wins at this same rate, but they keep playing like this, they're going to be a favorite for the Stanley Cup. Absolutely going to be a favorite for the Stanley Cup. Right up there with, I mean, Tampa, just make the playoffs, you're going to be one of the teams people are betting on. The Capitals, 16 games, 9-2-5 record, 719 points percentage. Again, they've won 9 games out of 16, and yet, because they've got 5 losses in extra time, they have a 719 points percentage over their last 10, 5-2-3 record. So that's somewhat mediocre. Their last game, of course, was an overtime loss against Anaheim, but they're not losing in regulation, so they're still, gaining ground on teams that are trying to catch them. The New York Rangers, a very interesting team here, 16 games, 10-3-3 record, also a 719 points percentage. They're 6-2-2 in their last 10. They've won 4 in a row. So the Capitals are trending in the wrong direction. The Rangers are trending in the right direction. And right behind them, 14 games, 8-4-2 record, 643 points percentage. The Chicago Blackhawks, who are 6-3-1 in their last 10. And they beat Calgary last night in a measure of revenge for the drubbing Calgary put on them in Calgary. So, yeah, Philadelphia at home beats Calgary. And, yeah, their record has been pretty darn solid all the way through. 14 games, 8-4-2 record isn't bad at all. Detroit is in a playoff spot, but they've played more games than every team that's trying to catch them, and they're 8-8-2, which is a 500 points percentage. They're 4-6 in their last 10. They've lost their last 2 games. I understand they're in a playoff spot right now. That is better than any of us expected. I don't expect them to end up being in a playoff spot by the end of the year, because behind them you've got some pretty good teams here. One of them is going to get hot. New Jersey, 14 games, 7-4-3 record, 607 points percentage. So right here, with the over 600 points percentage below the playoff line, that's something you don't have in the West. You have 5 teams that are 500 or above, but here you have 4 teams that are 500 above, and here you have 4 teams that are 500 above. The difference being 3 of them are above 600 in their points percentage. But that's where Detroit stands out, right? Boston, 13 games, 8-5 record, 6-4 over their last 10. So they're getting wins at a higher rate than New Jersey, who are 4-3-3 in their last 10. Their last game was an overtime loss. For Boston, I think they've played well. I think they've had a tough schedule. I expect the wins to start showing up now that their schedule should get a little bit easier for them. Carolina and Florida playing really well, and Florida was an opponent of Boston's twice. So it's understandable that they've got off to a little bit of a slow start. Columbus, 8-5, also 6-4 in their last 10, won their last game, 615 points percentage. Columbus and Boston could end up being teams that are fighting for either this spot here, where Detroit currently is occupied, or maybe Boston and Columbus can put together some kind of a winning streak to threaten Rangers, Tampa Bay, maybe the Capitals, and maybe the Maple Leafs, right? Buffalo has stayed competitive far longer than anybody expected. They're 7-6-2. Their points percentage is .533. And over their last 10, they're 4-5-1. They did win their last game last night over Pittsburgh. And then there's a drop-off. It's not as dramatic a drop-off as you have in the West. But you have Pittsburgh at 5-6-4, 467 points percentage. They're 2-6-2 in their last 10. They've lost their last 3 in regulation. And it's starting to snowball at this point, and we'll see if getting players back helps to stop that, and if Pittsburgh goes on that run. I kind of expect Pittsburgh to end up going on some kind of a run, but it is starting to look like maybe they don't make the playoffs this year, right? The New York Islanders, all of their games on the road, I feel like this is unfair. However, they went 5-6-2, and that road trip fell apart at the end of it. They have a 462 points percentage. They're 4-4-2 in their last 10. They lost their last 4 in regulation. So for the Islanders, they'll be very glad to get home, have to be exhausted from all those road games in a row. And now we'll see whether or not the Islanders are able to jump back into a playoff spot. But right now, the Rangers, Capitals, Carolina all look pretty well entrenched in the top 3 spots. And Philadelphia, we'll see. And then if Philadelphia were to drop, does Columbus take that spot? Because Columbus isn't far off, right? Montreal, this is where the drop happens in the East. It's the last 2 teams in the East where it happens. Montreal's 4-12-2. It's a miserable record for them. 278 points percentage. They're 2-6-2 in their last 10. They've lost 2 in a row. And I would say the line of, so better luck next year, is right above Montreal. The Montreal and Ottawa are the 2 teams in the East that we can look at right now and say, yeah, playoffs are likely gone for them already. Ottawa, 15 games, 4-10-1 record. They're, of course, shut down right now. They have a 300 points percentage with that 4-10-1. It equals Seattle's. They're 2-7-1 in their last 10. They've lost their last game. They won't play again until this coming Monday at the earliest. And again, their 2-7-1 record in their last 10 is right down there with Seattle. And it's the same record Vancouver has over their last 10 as well. So it's an interesting overall picture we have in the NHL when we look at the overall standings. I do think that one of the California teams probably ends up falling out, but I don't know which one. It's easy to look at Anaheim's schedule and go, well, it'll get tougher. But it's a balanced schedule this year. The balanced schedule, I think, and with the addition of Seattle making it even more balanced now, you have teams more likely to play each other 3 times than 4, and it just basically means everybody plays everybody else at pretty close to an equal amount. It's 2, 3, or 4 games. And so I don't know. We'll see. Maybe Anaheim can stay there. It is a busy schedule, though. It's a very busy schedule that we're seeing in November, and we're going to see in December as well, because they have the Christmas break. And then you have the Olympic break, and you have the All-Star break. And they want to try to get it all squeezed in so that the season ends on April 29th at the latest. So it's going to be busy, and this is why we've already got teams with 16, 15 games, and in Detroit's case, 18 games. Just think about how ridiculous it is. You've got a team that's played 18 games in Detroit, and then you've got teams over here that have played 13 games in Boston, Columbus, understandably Islanders, because they're all on the road, and then you've got Colorado here with 12. So it is an odd season scheduling-wise. That means that for Colorado, they're going to be a lot busier than other teams in order to catch up in the games played department. But we'll see what happens. So which team has surprised you the most? Which one do you think has overachieved to this point and you think they're going to drop? And which one do you think is in the not in the playoffs column here and here that you think is going to change that storyline before the season's done? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.